Welcome back to another episode of the Change Dude podcast. I am Saeed Rafe, and today we are stepping into one of the most urgent, thrilling, and perhaps misunderstood topics in the global startup conversation: what it means to launch and lead a company in the age of generative AI. The title of this episode is not just a play on words. Founders of the Future is a challenge, it's a vision, and it's a reflection of a very real shift taking place right now. Not 5 years from now, not next quarter, but this moment. GenAI is not only transforming what products can do, it's reprogramming what it means to be a founder in the first place. We are going to dive deep into this transformation, unpacking how GenAI is rewriting the rules of startup formation, product design, funding, competition, and even founder psychology. We will explore how the startup world is being redefined not just by smarter tech, but by new expectations around speed, capital efficiency, idea to MVP pipelines, and what it means to launch at all. And throughout, we will anchor this discussion in Europe and beyond, looking at how founders across ecosystems are responding to this exponential shift, some with resistance, some with open arms, and others with experimental curiosity. This won't be a hype episode. You won't hear me echo the marketing buzz around LLMs or AI superintelligence. What you will hear is a grounded narrative, one that connects technology with behavior, infrastructure with imagination, policy with practice. Because if you are a founder today, or even just dreaming of becoming one, you are entering a landscape that is fundamentally different from even 2 years ago. And how you understand, build, and adapt to GenAI's momentum will shape not just your product roadmap, but your relevance in a deeply evolving tech economy. So let's zoom out before we zoom in. Let's begin by laying the groundwork. What exactly do we mean when we say the age of GenAI, and what makes it so distinct from the waves of AI that came before? To understand this moment, we need to go back, not to the beginning of artificial intelligence in the 1950s or the winters of stalled progress, but more recently to the decade leading up to 2022. In those years, artificial intelligence was already everywhere, quietly embedded in our recommendation engines, search rankings, fraud detection systems, logistics, routing, and language translation. It was powerful, but it was narrow. It optimized, classified, clustered, and predicted, but it didn't create. Enter generative AI, spearheaded by transformer models, deep learning breakthroughs, and massive computation scaled by companies like OpenAI, Google DeepMind, and Anthropic. Suddenly, AI could write essays, generate legal documents, design product interfaces, simulate conversations, even code entire applications. The interface to intelligence itself shifted from abstract algorithms to collaborative, language-based co-creation. What changed wasn't just technical capability, what changed was access. The power of AI became something any founder, designer, or even non-technical dreamer could wield. You no longer needed a PhD in computer science or a cloud contract with NVIDIA. You needed curiosity, creativity, and a problem worth solving. The barrier to experimentation collapsed, and this collapse has triggered a proliferation we have never seen before. An explosion of tools, frameworks, APIs, and startups all jockeying to build the future with this new creative force. But what's truly revolutionary about Gen AI is not just technology, it's the implications for founding. Founding a company used to mean assembling a team, raising a round, writing code, iterating, launching, and scaling. Today, in the age of Gen AI, we are seeing early contours of a different model, what some call AI native entrepreneurship. The implications are enormous. You can now ideate, prototype, test, and iterate entire product ideas solo in a matter of days. Founders are building micro SaaS tools in weekends, validating use cases through GPT-driven workflows, generating landing pages with no-code tools enhanced by LLMs, and running support, sales, and onboarding via agentic automation. The average founder workload is being compressed and redefined, not just because AI speeds things up, but because it multiplies what one person can do alone. This isn't just a productivity boost, it's a shift in how we imagine what a founder is. Do you still need a co-founder if ChatGPT can help architect your infrastructure? Do you need a large seed round if your stack runs on 5 open source models and 2 APIs? Do you hire 10 people if 3 autonomous agents can handle 60% of your workflows? These are the philosophical and practical questions generative AI introduces. Some celebrate this as a revolution, more inclusion, more experimentation, more speed. Others worry that it fragments teams, undermines craftsmanship, and inflates a bubble of half-baked ideas. But whether you see it as opportunity or overload, one thing is clear. GenAI has changed the logic of starting up. And if you are in Europe, whether Berlin, Amsterdam, Lisbon, or Warsaw, the implications are uniquely complex. Why? Because Europe isn't Silicon Valley. It's more regulated, more decentralized, more risk-averse, and yet deeply rich in research, design, and purpose-driven innovation. Which brings us to the next act in this narrative. Let's cover GenAI's global landscape and the European advantage. To understand how founders can thrive in this new era, we need to examine not only the capabilities of GenAI, but also the geopolitical and economic terrain it's unfolding in. Right now, the global GenAI ecosystem is dominated by a handful of power centers. The United States, especially California, has entrenched itself as the originator and the financier of most foundational GenAI models. OpenAI, Anthropic, Google DeepMind, and Meta dominate the transformer model landscape. They have access to vast capital, compute resources, top-tier talent, and regulatory leeway to scale aggressively. China, meanwhile, is developing its own ecosystem, anchored by Baidu, Alibaba, and government-funded AI labs with less global reach but intense internal acceleration. Much of its GenAI effort is being funneled towards enterprise productivity, state applications, and consumer tools. So where does Europe stand? In many ways, Europe's GenAI ecosystem feels embryonic. It doesn't yet have a foundational model that rivals GPT-4 or Claude. It hasn't birthed an OpenAI or Hugging Face level enterprise that captures mainstream imagination, but beneath the surface, a quiet, highly strategic movement is building momentum. Unlike the US or China, Europe is framing GenAI through a sovereign lens. It wants to compete, yes, but also to regulate, shape, and differentiate. In 2024, the AI Act became the world's first major legislative framework for AI governance. It classifies AI systems by risk, mandates transparency, bans certain surveillance uses, and demands robust disclosures from foundation model developers. For many in Silicon Valley, this felt like a break. For many in Brussels, it was a necessary seatbelt. Europe is trying to make GenAI trustworthy by design, not just performant. And for founders, this opens up both constraints and opportunities. On the one hand, regulation creates friction. Compliance with AI disclosures, copyright risks in generative outputs, bias auditing, and user safety protocols can feel daunting for early-stage startups. A founder in Vienna or Milan has to think differently than one in Austin. On the other hand, this creates a unique strategic advantage. If you can build a GenAI product that meets European regulatory standards by default, you may unlock a global trust premium that US-led tools cannot always offer. Founders in the EU are increasingly leaning into this principle. They are exploring vertical GenAI tools, healthcare, legal tech, fintech, and public services, where compliance is a feature, not a bug. Instead of racing towards chatbots that mirror ChatGPT, they are crafting narrow, high-trust applications designed for systems that must be explainable, secure, and deeply localized. And that's where Europe's edge quietly emerges. In the age of GenAI, everyone talks about scale, but few talk about local context. This is where European founders may actually have a head start. Unlike the US, where English is the lingua franca and consumer behavior is more uniform, Europe is a mosaic. 27 official EU languages, dozens more spoken across communities, deep cultural and behavioral variance. This makes localization harder, but also more essential. GenAI thrives on language, which means that models and tools built with multilingual, cultural-aware datasets may offer qualitative superiority in their domains. Already, We are seeing European founders build translation tools that go beyond literal word swaps, tools that adapt to legal nuances in Dutch, medical terminology in Polish, or youth slang in Catalan. More than that, Europe's public institutions and industries, healthcare, education, law, government services are beginning to seek AI systems that reflect European values: transparency, privacy, inclusion, accessibility, and safety. This isn't just ideology, it's architecture. The structure of European markets demands tech that understands ethical complexity. So, for founders building GenAI products in this environment, there is a unique angle. If you can solve for local depth, not just global scale, you can build defensibility. You can offer what the GPTs and Geminis of the world cannot, a product that feels like it was made not just for the user, but for their specific context. Now let's zoom in on the life of a GenAI founder. Whether you are in Sofia or Stockholm, your journey likely begins the same way, with a concept sparked by friction. Maybe you are a doctor frustrated by paperwork. Maybe you are a teacher drowning in admin. Maybe you are a lawyer tracking hundreds of clauses. In the past, solving these problems required complex software, large teams, and years of development. Today, you can begin prototyping in days using tools like LangChain, RAG pipelines, Hugging Face models, and LLM inference APIs. But here is where the game changes. Speed is no longer the novelty. It's the requirement. If you are launching a GenAI product today, you are entering an arms race of iteration. Your competitors can build as fast as you. Your users expect instant value. And your ability to differentiate depends less on core tech and more on interface, use case fit, and continuous learning loops. The classic advice, build fast and break things, doesn't quite apply, because if you break things in GenAI, you might violate GDPR, hallucinate facts, or cause harm. The new motto is more like build fast, validate ethically, iterate visibly. Many GenAI founders in Europe are now adapting their launch playbooks. Instead of stealth, they are launching MVPs publicly on Twitter, Reddit, or Product Hunt to gather signal. Instead of static SaaS, they are building tools that learn from user inputs in real time. And instead of chasing big seed rounds, they are bootstrapping with a blend of grant, angel checks, and revenue from day one. This is not just lean startup, it's agentic startup. A world where a solo founder might build a venture-grade tool using agents to generate content, answer support, schedule meetings, write code, and onboard users all autonomously. It's not fiction, it's happening. And it raises important questions we will explore in the next section. If you can do all this with GenAI, what should you build? What counts as meaningful? What makes a GenAI startup actually useful, ethical, and sustainable? That's where strategy meets soul. Let's discuss new founder archetypes. The rise of GenAI has not only reshaped tools and timelines, it has reshaped who becomes a founder and how they define success. Just a few years ago, founders often followed a familiar pattern: software engineers solving technical problems, business grads hunting for market arbitrage, experienced professionals spinning out large corporates to fix inefficiencies they had witnessed firsthand. These archetypes still exist, but GenAI has expanded the playing field dramatically. Today, the founder pool includes artists building generative music startups, teachers launching AI tutors for underserved languages, former healthcare workers designing triage assistants, and legal clerks creating compliance co-pilots for local jurisdictions. None of these individuals may identify as techies in the traditional sense, but they are all leveraging GenAI to transform their knowledge into platforms. This shift represents something profound, a democratization of startup initiation. GenAI lowers the technical barrier so far that domain expertise becomes the core asset. Instead of hiring engineers to interpret your vision, you now use GenAI to translate your workflows into functional prototypes directly. This removes friction, accelerates experimentation, and makes it far easier for conventional founders to enter the arena. And yet, this new accessibility introduces a new challenge. Just because you can build something, should you? And how do you choose what's worth building? This is where founder strategy becomes existential. In a saturated, rapidly evolving ecosystem, attention is limited. Hype cycles move fast. Users are cautious. And differentiation becomes harder. Which brings us to the next big shift: use case gravity. In the early days of GenAI, mid-2023 to early 2024, the startup landscape was flooded with horizontal tools. AI that could write your emails, summarize your meetings, generate blog posts, or code entire applications. Many were useful, some were novel, but most felt interchangeable. By 2025, a new understanding emerged. Horizontal general-purpose tools were a race to the bottom unless paired with deep vertical insights. Why? Because foundational models commoditize the core capability. Language generation, summarization, image synthesis. The differentiator shifted to context. Founders who thrived in this phase were those who anchored GenAI in highly specific domains, often with high-stakes workflows, opaque processes, or neglected user bases. In legal tech, we saw founders develop AI paralegals focused on regional tax laws or labor contracts, not generic chatbots. In climate tech, others built AI assistants that ingested geospatial data to optimize agricultural yields or wildfire responses, hyperlocal and mission-critical. In health tech, startups created GenAI systems to draft patient-facing post-visit summaries in plain language, respecting both medical nuance and data privacy laws. What all these cases share is a principle: augmentation over automation. They don't aim to replace professionals, they aim to accelerate them, reduce cognitive load, and enable better decisions. Founders who understand this nuance, who design GenAI not as a silver bullet but as a force multiplier, build longer-lasting value. They build trust. And in the context of European regulation, they stay ahead of compliance and risk. But this brings us to perhaps the most important conversation of all: ethics. Every founder working in GenAI today must contend with a stark reality. You are no longer just building a product. You are shaping how intelligence is perceived, distributed, and acted upon. The lines between tool and tutor, assistant and authority are blurring, and with that comes responsibility. Let's start with obvious: hallucination. Large language models are probabilistic by nature. They generate outputs based on statistical patterns, not truth. In sensitive domains like law, health, or finance, this creates risk. A wrong answer isn't just inconvenient, it can be harmful. Founders must confront this directly. That means building guardrails, testing edge cases, designing for uncertainty, and integrating human oversight. More than that, it means being transparent with users. If your GenAI copilot has a margin of error, you must communicate that. If it struggles with ambiguity, you must clarify when and how. Then there is bias. Foundational models reflect the data they are trained on, and most of the data comes from public internet sources, rife with historical inequities, stereotypes, and cultural assumptions. Founders deploying GenAI must ask: whose voice is being centered? Whose experience is being modeled? Whose exclusion is being replicated? This is not theoretical. In Europe, AI governance is real. The EU AI Act already mandates explainability, risk categorization, and user rights. If you are building a GenAI tool that supports legal decision, medical triage, public policy, or education, you may fall under high-risk classification and face additional disclosure, auditing, and safety requirements. And even beyond regulation, there is a deeper question: what kind of intelligence are we building into society? Founders of the future must hold a dual mindset: ambition and humility. You need to believe in your ability to shape new paradigms and stay grounded in the moral, psychological, and social complexity of that mission. Because GenAI is not neutral, it reflects us, accelerates us, and sometimes distorts us. Your choices as a founder, what data you train on, what guardrails you set, what user experience flows you optimize will have downstream impacts on how people work, think, learn, and relate. So let me offer this framing. Building in the age of GenAI is not about being a genius. It's about being a custodian, a steward of possibility and responsibility. Which leads us to the next chapter in this conversation. How founders can build not just smarter products, but durable, defensible companies in the GenAI era. So let's discuss how to go from prototype to company. It's one thing to build a promising prototype with GenAI. It's another thing entirely to turn that prototype into a company. One that survives beyond the hype cycles, secures investment, wins trust, and delivers consistent value. The gap between clever demo and a real business is as wide as ever. In fact, in the GenAI era, it may even be wider, because now the barrier to building is low. The volume of new ideas is overwhelming. Investors are flooded with pitches. Users are bombarded with tools. Every few weeks, a new agent, assistant, or productivity enhancer goes viral, only to fade away quietly. This is the reality many GenAI founders now face: abundance of noise, scarcity of depth. So what does it take to survive this? What transforms a GenAI side project into a scalable, sustainable business? First, let's acknowledge the elephant in the room. Virality is not validation. Just because your AI assistant trended on Product Hunt or your GPT wrapper hit 100K users in a week doesn't mean you have a business model. GenAI products are seductive, they demo beautifully, but unless they solve a real painful recurring problem, users will drift. So the first task for a founder is to return to basics. Who is your user? And what are they really trying to get done? Don't just ask what GenAI can do. Ask what friction it can meaningfully remove. Talk to users, sit with them, watch them struggle with workflows. Validate that your product is saving time, increasing confidence, reducing errors, or unlocking something they couldn't do before. If you skip this phase, no amount of AI magic will save you. Now let's talk money. At first glance, GenAI seems like a funding golden goose. Billions have poured into this space. From foundation model labs to application layers, investors have opened their checkbooks, eager not to miss the next OpenAI or Mistral. But beneath that surface enthusiasm lies a sobering reality for early-stage founders. Funding has become polarized. Top-tier GenAI startups with elite pedigrees, Stanford founders, or alumni from OpenAI and DeepMind often raise with little more than a slide deck. Meanwhile, most others, especially those outside the US, face skepticism, due diligence hurdles, and cap table caution. This is especially true in Europe. Many VCs here are still navigating the implications of the AI Act. They are unsure how future regulations will affect go-to-market strategies. They worry about data sovereignty, copyright liability, and compliance overhead. And they are cautious, less inclined to chase vision without proof. For founders, this means one thing: you need traction. Not just users, but usage. Not just signups, but impact. Whether through paid pilots, design partnerships, or early enterprise customers, showing that your tool works in the wild is essential. The good news: you don't need a massive burn rate to get there. GenAI's low-cost infrastructure means you can launch, iterate with minimum capital. Many founders are delaying fundraising entirely, bootstrapping through niche communities, monetizing through premium tiers, or leveraging public grants and university partnerships. And that's not just lean, it's strategic. It keeps your equity clean, your vision focused, and your execution grounded. As your startup evolves, so too must your product philosophy. In traditional SaaS, you optimized for user experience flows, user inputs, and deterministic logic. In generative AI, you are now designing experiences with uncertainty baked in. Outputs are probabilistic, users are unsure what's under the hood, expectations vary. This requires a new kind of design maturity. Trust becomes your North Star. Not blind trust, but earned trust through transparency, responsiveness, and control. Show users what your AI is doing. Give them options to review, edit, or override. Don't try to automate everything. Try to empower the user more intelligently. We are starting to see GenAI companies build interfaces that feel less like dashboards and more like conversations. Not chatbots, but contextual agents embedded directly in workflows. These agents don't just respond, they anticipate, assist, and collaborate. But designing these interactions is subtle. The more powerful your system, the more likely users will ask, what happens if it gets it wrong? And your job as a founder is to make sure they never feel alone in that uncertainty. This is why many of the best Gen AI products today are human in the loop by default. They use AI not to replace decision making, but to scaffold it, to help users think faster, act smarter, and feel more in control. That's a very different design ethos from the hands-off automation of Web 2. It's closer to partnership. Eventually, if your product works, you will face another test: scale. And scale in the Gen AI world is not just about traffic or users, it's about trust at volume. Can your system perform reliably across use cases, languages, edge cases? Can it adapt as foundation models evolve? Can you stay ahead of privacy standards, data protection laws, and user consent flows? These questions are particularly important in Europe. With the EU AI Act now active, startups need to think globally but build locally. That means hiring legal counsel early, investing in ethical design, and preparing for audits, especially if your product touches healthcare, education, law, or labor. But there is opportunity here too. If you can prove that your product is AI compliant, privacy centric, and designed with European values in mind, you may unlock markets your competitors cannot enter. Public institutions, regulated industries, and risk-averse corporates will increasingly seek trusted Gen AI partners. The bar is high, but so is the reward. Before we close this section, one final note. Perhaps the most human of all, the mindset of the founder. Building in the Gen AI era is exhilarating, but also exhausting. You are racing against time, trends, and technical shifts. What's state of the art today may be obsolete tomorrow. APIs change, models break, users disappear, features become irrelevant overnight. In this environment, resilience is not optional, it's foundational. You need to cultivate a mindset that can absorb volatility without losing direction. You need to stay curious, adapt fast, and stay calm amid the noise. Not every pivot is failure. Not every hype wave is worth riding. The best founders in this era are not the ones who chase every flash in the pan, but the ones who build from first principles, trust their users, and iterate with conviction. If Gen AI is reprogramming the startup playbook, then founders must reprogram their own narratives too, not just around growth, but around grit. Now let's talk about something that doesn't usually appear on pitch decks or VC memos, but shapes the very soul of every startup: culture. When you are building a Gen AI native company, you are not just building tech. You are creating an environment where humans and intelligent systems co-create, collaborate, and coexist. This redefines not only what your product does, but also how your team thinks, works, and grows. In traditional startups, culture was built around energy, speed, and flat hierarchies. You hired ambitious generalists. You pushed late hours, you iterated fast, but in the Gen AI world, your culture is being shaped by hybrid intelligence, by agents that complete tasks faster than interns, by models that write, design, analyze, and sometimes even strategize. This changes team dynamics fundamentally. Suddenly, roles blur. The line between doing the work and orchestrating the work becomes less clear. Your marketer doesn't just run campaigns, they prompt GPT for narratives, run sentiment analysis, and use image models to generate visual assets. Your customer success lead doesn't just answer queries, they design AI support flows, train bots, and flag hallucinations. Even your product designer might be spending as much time curating data sets as mocking up Figma files. So, what kind of culture survives in this fluid, accelerated environment? The answer is not more process, it's more intentionality. Founders must define early what they really value in human contribution. Is it creativity? Is it judgment? Is it collaboration, empathy, decision making, taste, curiosity? These are the things that GenAI cannot replicate, not yet, and maybe never fully. And these are the qualities you must cultivate, protect, and reward. Because if you don't, your startup culture risks becoming transactional, just a group of people managing models rather than shaping meaning. This leads us to a pressing question in boardrooms, job interviews, and founder DMs across the world. What kind of talent do you hire now? The first instinct for many is to hire more engineers, machine learning experts, AI researchers, prompt engineers. But here's the twist. GenAI is making non-technical talent exponentially more powerful. A skilled operations lead who knows how to use GPT-4 with structured prompts might outperform a junior analyst. A marketing strategist with AI fluency can A/B test 100 landing pages variants in a day. A founder who knows how to stack AI tools into product workflows can move at the pace of entire teams. So the most valuable hires today are not just technically elite, they are AI native. They think in workflows, not just in tasks. They can imagine how agents, prompts, and models can reshape how they work, not just what they work on. They understand how to ask the right questions of AI, not just how to write the right code. This is creating a new skill layer across every role: sales, support, content, HR, finance, all being redefined by automation and augmentation. The best teams aren't the ones with the most engineers, they are the ones with the most AI integrated thinkers. And here's where Europe has an interesting advantage again. Its emphasis on cross-disciplinary education, design, humanities, language, critical thinking. These are not peripheral in GenAI. They are essential because models don't think, they generate, and it takes human insight to guide that generation toward purpose. The implications go even deeper. GenAI is not just changing what we do, it's changing how we work. We are entering a world of asynchronous, distributed, AI-assisted collaboration. Agents run tasks while you sleep. Meetings are summarized by bots. Product specs are drafted by LLMs. Even brainstorming sessions can happen with a virtual co-founder that never tires, forgets, or disagrees. This might sound efficient, and in some ways it is, but it also risks alienation. If your startup becomes a relay race between agents and dashboards, where does human connection fit in? Where does mentorship happen? How does creative friction survive? Founders must be proactive here. You cannot outsource culture to models. You cannot automate meaning. So the best GenAI native startups are experimenting with new rituals, AI-assisted stand-ups that summarize progress, yes, but also dedicate human-only hours for deep thinking and emotional check-ins. Asynchronous workflows, yes, but with weekly live jams to reconnect. AI planning assistants, yes, but followed by human critique sessions. The goal is not to replace work with AI, it's to elevate work with AI and reinvest time into what makes us human: meaning, clarity, growth, connection. This philosophy also extends to mental health, because when the world accelerates, our brains don't necessarily keep up. The fear of irrelevance, of being outpaced by tools, of losing professional value, all of this is real. And inside early stage companies where ambiguity is already the norm, generative AI adds a layer of psychological volatility. Founders must name this, talk about it, normalize learning curves, experimentation, and discomfort. If your team doesn't feel safe exploring the edge of what's possible, you will never stay ahead of the curve. Finally, let's touch on something very new: the emergence of founding teams that aren't fully human. Sounds odd, right? But consider this: many GenAI startups are being built by 1 to 2 human founders and a stack of persistent agents. These agents handle DevOps, calendar scheduling, lead generation, email sequencing, onboarding, ticket triaging, and even internal documentation. In some cases, these agents are orchestrated by a single founder who becomes more like a conductor than a CEO. In other cases, they are embedded across functions, each team member deploying and maintaining their own AI teammates. This is no longer speculative. There are early-stage startups where over 70% of internal operations are being handled by autonomous or semi-autonomous systems. What does this mean for culture? It means that startups now have two nervous systems: the human network and the agentic layer. They must interact, inform, and support each other, which means your company's culture is now partially shaped by the behaviors and defaults of your AI tools. How your agents respond to customers, how your automation sequences are worded, how your LLMs interpret context, these things matter. They are part of the experience, they reflect you. So part of building culture now is about prompt culture, about designing behaviors and ethics into the very way of your AI interacts, about aligning your values with your models, not just your people. It's new, it's messy, but it is happening. So here we are at the edge of a moment that is more than just technological, it's philosophical, it's existential, it's deeply human. We began this episode by asking, what does it mean to be a founder in the age of GenAI? Now, we can say with some confidence, it means being someone who is not only building for change, but inside change. Someone navigating a terrain that shifts under your feet. Someone who is brave enough to launch in uncertainty, fast enough to learn on the fly, humble enough to adapt, and clear enough to know why it matters. The GenAI era is not a continuation of the Web 2 playbook. It's a break from it. Startups today are not just writing software, they are shaping how intelligence operates in society, how decisions are made, how knowledge flows, how labor is distributed, and in that light, founding a company becomes something more than a career move. It becomes a kind of calling. Not in a grand, romanticized way, but in a deeply practical, ethical way. Because this era defines how we live, work, learn, and relate for decades to come. And those who build the tools, platforms, and systems we use will be writing the script of that future. So what does this calling look like in practice? It looks like shipping with urgency, but also with clarity. In a world where move fast and break things cause more harm than innovation, GenAI founders must move fast but with foresight. They must question not just what's possible, but what's responsible, what's sustainable, what's meaningful. It looks like crafting tools that elevate, not replace, human agency. GenAI should not infantilize users. It should empower them, make them smarter, free them to be more creative, more curious, and more collaborative. The best GenAI products don't just answer, they invite exploration. It looks like shaping culture inside your startup that reflects the kind of world you want to build outside it. A culture that values autonomy, imagination, feedback, and psychological safety. One where models support the mission, but people define the soul. It looks like embracing discomfort, because you will be wrong. Frequently, what works today might not tomorrow. Models will change, tools will break, users will churn, and still you will show up again. Not because it's easy, but because you are building with conviction. It looks like becoming not just a technologist or a founder or an operator, but a translator, a person who can bridge the technical and the human, who can explain to investors why your LLM-based product works, who can talk to customers without jargon, who can mentor your team through complexity, who can write and speak and tell stories that move people. Because in this new landscape, clarity is a superpower. Let me speak directly now to those listening in Europe, founders, builders, dreamers. This continent is often seen as slow, overly cautious, fragmented, compared to the breakneck speed of Silicon Valley or the state-led push of China. Europe can seem like it's playing defense. But I would argue this is your edge, because when the rest of the world builds without boundaries, Europe builds with values. When others chase growth at any cost, Europe seeks alignment. When others race to automate, Europe chooses augmentation. When others ignore local nuance, Europe leans into it. The EU's AI Act, its focus on digital sovereignty, its public investment in research, its complex but intentional bureaucracy, these aren't bugs. They are features of a system that takes human dignity seriously. And yes, that makes startup life harder in the short term. But it also means that founders here are uniquely positioned to lead the next chapter, a chapter where trust, transparency, and resilience will matter more than virality. So if you are building in Europe, don't see regulation as the enemy. See it as the scaffolding on which you can build companies that last. Don't try to clone the valley. Build something uniquely yours, rooted in your culture, your language, your markets, your ethics. And don't underestimate your capacity, because the infrastructure is finally catching up. Funds are emerging, grants are available, talent is local, cloud is scalable, and most of all, the hunger is real. At the core of all of this is a very simple truth. Technology will keep changing, but your courage must remain constant. There will always be new models, new APIs, new frameworks, new funding trends. But the inner engine, the drive to build, to serve, to understand, to connect, that's what sets great founders apart. So if you are listening to this and you have been waiting to start, to test, to launch, consider this your moment. Not because GenAI will make it easier, but because it will make it possible. To start leaner, to test faster, to serve better, to learn sooner, and most of all, to build from your own voice. Because the future doesn't belong to those with the best models. It belongs to those with the deepest insight, the strongest intent, and the most grounded resilience. So whether you are building a productivity agent in Berlin, a climate intelligence platform in Helsinki, an AI tutor in Istanbul, or a human-centered compliance tool in Amsterdam, know this. You are not just responding to a trend, you are participating in a transformation. You are the founder the future needs. So build with focus, build with care, build with joy, and I'll see you on the road ahead.